If you act as if God Himself is within you, everything shifts in your favor. You have been praying like a debtor, asking, bargaining, waiting for crumbs while the banquet sits untouched. This is the paradox. When you stop pleading and begin commanding your thought with faith, the invisible answers your summons. Napoleon Hill taught that thought charged by purpose moves the laws of the universe. You who adopt that discipline, step into a lineage that turns desperation into harvest. Speak now like a sovereign, align your will with infinite intelligence, and watch miracles flood your life as if a drought had ended overnight. The prayer you learned as a child was a request thrown into the void, a desperate whisper aimed at empty sky, a beggar's song sung to silence. That is not prayer. That is the religion of waiting, of hoping, of surrender, disguised as faith. I am here to teach you the prayer that builds empires, the prayer that commands mountains to move not through magic, but through law, the prayer that transforms begging into building, hoping into commanding, waiting into creating. When you learn to pray with method, precision, and spiritual law, the word miracle loses its mystery. It becomes consequence. It becomes the natural result of mind aligned with purpose, intention fused with action, and faith expressed through organized effort. You will discover 6 movements of power. First, the prayer of definite purpose that replaces vague wishing with executive command. Second, the fire of autosuggestion that transforms words into living force. Third, the government of self through sacred silence where divine intelligence speaks. Fourth, the Mastermind Principle that multiplies individual faith through organized alliance. Fifth, the action that burns bridges and creates conditions for the extraordinary. And finally, the ritual that makes this transformation permanent. In Movement VI, you will receive 11 lines of mirror work that reprogram your subconscious mind, followed by the 30-60-90-day protocol that measures your spiritual progress through material results. But first, let us shatter the lie that keeps most prayers powerless. Movement I, the prayer of definite purpose. You have been taught to pray in generalities. Bless me, help me, guide me. These are not prayers. They are the confused mumblings of a mind that has never learned to think with precision. The universe does not respond to vagueness. It responds to definite, clear, emotionally charged commands. Andrew Carnegie did not pray for success. He prayed for the specific ability to organize men and materials into a steel empire that would serve America while creating personal fortune. His prayer was architectural. It had blueprints. It had deadlines. It had measurable outcomes. The prayer of definite purpose operates on a simple but profound law. What you can describe clearly, you can create systematically. What remains vague in your mind will remain absent from your life. Listen carefully to this truth. Your subconscious mind is not creative. It is responsive. It does not generate ideas from nothing. It assembles resources to match the patterns you consistently feed it through thought, feeling, and declaration. When you pray with definite purpose, you are programming your inner machinery to recognize and attract the specific elements required for your vision's manifestation. But most men pray like children asking for Christmas presents. They have no understanding of the work required, the price demanded, or the responsibility that comes with answered prayer. They want the miracle without the method, the result without the rigor. I will show you a different way. Your prayer must contain 4 elements. First, the specific objective stated in concrete terms. Second, the deadline by which this objective will be achieved. Third, the service you will render in exchange for this objective's fulfillment. Fourth, the clear mental picture of yourself, already in possession of the result. Here is how Carnegie prayed. I will organize the greatest steel production system America has ever seen by 1900. I will serve the nation's need for infrastructure while creating employment for thousands. I see myself commanding this empire with wisdom, directing resources with precision, and building wealth through value creation. Notice the architecture of this prayer. Specific objective, greatest steel system. Deadline, by 1900. Service, infrastructure and employment. Mental picture. Himself, commanding with wisdom and precision. What is your definite purpose? Not your wish, not your hope, your definite, measurable, deadline-driven objective. Write it now. One sentence. Make it concrete enough that a stranger could measure your success or failure. Make it specific enough that your subconscious mind knows exactly what resources to gather. Do not write, "I want to be rich." Write, "I will build a business generating $50,000 annual profit by December of next year through providing accounting services to small manufacturers." Do not toad to a building. Write, "I want love." Write, "I will attract and marry a woman of intelligence and character who shares my vision for building a family of achievement by June of next year." Do not write, "I want health." Write, "I will restore my body to optimal strength through disciplined nutrition and exercise, achieving my ideal weight of 170 pounds by March of next year." Your prayer is your contract with the universe. Make it legal. Make it binding. Make it measurable. Now speak this declaration: "I do not beg the universe for favors. I negotiate with divine law through definite purpose. My prayer is my architectural plan. My faith is my building permit. My action is my construction crew." But definite purpose without emotional intensity remains powerless. A blueprint without fire cannot command the materials to assemble themselves. You must learn to charge your words with the electricity of feeling. Do you pray with passion? Or do you recite words like a clerk reading inventory? The subconscious mind responds not to logic but to emotion, not to reason but to feeling. The prayer spoken with conviction penetrates deeper than the prayer mumbled in routine. Watch how Carnegie transformed intention into reality. He did not simply think about steel. He felt the heat of furnaces. He heard the rhythm of hammers. He smelled the smoke of industry. He tasted the satisfaction of wages paid to grateful workers. His prayer was not intellectual. It was sensory. It was alive. This is why most prayers fail. They are spoken by the mind alone. They never reach the subconscious because they carry no emotional charge. They are like letters written but never mailed, blueprints drawn but never submitted to the building department. Your prayer must make you feel something: fear of remaining where you are, excitement about where you are going, gratitude for the opportunity to serve, pride in the person you are becoming. Without feeling, prayer is just conversation with yourself. But when you combine definite purpose with emotional intensity, you create a spiritual transmission that penetrates the conscious mind and reaches the subconscious operating system. That is where transformation begins. That is where miracles are manufactured. Movement 2, autosuggestion with sacred fire. Words are tools. But words backed by emotion become weapons. Words repeated with conviction become commands. Words fused with visual imagery become creative force. The prayer of autosuggestion operates on the principle that what you repeatedly impress upon your subconscious mind with feeling will eventually express itself in your circumstances. This is not mysticism. This is the documented psychology of achievement applied through spiritual practice. Thomas Edison understood this law perfectly. He did not pray for inventions. He prayed with inventions. He would hold the mental image of electric light, feel the warmth of its glow, hear the click of the switch, see the faces of families gathered around its brightness. He repeated these sensory prayers thousands of times before the first successful bulb was created. Edison's laboratory notebooks reveal a man who used autosuggestion as deliberately as he used tools. Each experiment began with a prayer of visualization. Each failure was followed by a prayer of adjustment. Each small success was reinforced with a prayer of expansion. This is the secret most religious traditions have forgotten. Prayer is not about asking an external deity to change your circumstances. Prayer is about programming your internal machinery to recognize and create the circumstances you desire. Your subconscious mind cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you pray with autosuggestion, you are creating memory templates that your subconscious uses as guidance systems. You are installing software that runs automatically, scanning your environment for opportunities, resources, and connections that align with your programmed objectives. But this programming requires precision. You cannot simply repeat affirmations without feeling and expect transformation. The words must be chosen carefully. They must be spoken with conviction. They must be supported by clear mental pictures. Here's the formula that has created more millionaires than any other method. Specific words, emotional intensity, vivid visualization, and systematic repetition. Speak your prayer with your entire body. Let your voice carry conviction. Let your posture reflect authority. Let your eyes see the future as if it were present. Let your hands feel the success as if it were already within your grasp. Say this now. I command my subconscious to accept this instruction. I am building wealth through valuable service. I see money flowing to me because I am flowing value to others. I feel the satisfaction of problems solved, needs met, lives improved through my efforts. Did you feel those words, or did you read them like a shopping list? The difference between feeling and reading is the difference between programming and pretending. Your prayer must create physical sensations. When you speak of wealth, your body should feel prosperous. When you declare success, your posture should straighten with confidence. When you visualize your objectives, your emotions should respond as if the prayer had already been answered. This is why Edison succeeded where others failed. His prayers were not requests for external assistance. They were internal programming sessions. He was teaching his subconscious mind to recognize solutions, to notice opportunities, to attract collaborators who could accelerate his progress. Do you understand now why most prayers remain unanswered? They lack the emotional conviction necessary to penetrate the subconscious. They are spoken by minds that doubt, even while they pray. They are offered by people who hope God will do what they are unwilling to do themselves. But the prayer of autosuggestion makes you a partner in creation. It aligns your conscious intention with your subconscious resources. It transforms you from a beggar pleading for miracles into a builder creating them through law. What words will you use to program your transformation? Choose them as carefully as an architect chooses materials. Speak them as deliberately as a conductor directs an orchestra. Repeat them as consistently as a farmer plants seeds. Your subconscious is listening. It is always listening. What instructions are you giving it? What images are you showing it? What feelings are you teaching it to associate with your objectives? Remember this law. What you repeatedly declare with emotion, you eventually become. What you consistently visualize with conviction, you systematically attract. What you persistently feel as real eventually manifests as fact. But words and feelings without lines, wisdom remain dangerous toys. You must learn to balance active prayer with receptive silence. You must discover how to speak your desires and then listen for divine guidance. The next movement teaches the government of self through sacred silence, where the noise of wanting quiets long enough for wisdom to speak. Are you ready to stop talking long enough to hear the answers to your prayers? Are you prepared to discover that divine intelligence has been waiting for you to create space for its guidance? The prayer that commands miracles knows when to speak and when to listen. It knows when to declare and when to receive. It knows when to push forward and when to pause for instruction. Movement 3, the government of self through sacred silence. After the fire of declaration comes the peace of reception. After the storm of autosuggestion comes the calm of divine guidance. After you have spoken your desires with conviction, you must create space for wisdom to respond. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is the presence of infinite intelligence, seeking expression through your consciousness. But most minds are too noisy to receive this transmission. They are filled with worry, distraction, doubt, and the endless chatter of unconscious thinking. The prayer that produces miracles understands this rhythm. Active declaration followed by receptive listening. Speaking followed by silence. Programming followed by perception. King Solomon did not become the wisest man of his time through constant talking. He became wise through the balance of bold requests and humble listening. When God offered him anything he desired, Solomon asked for understanding. Then he waited in silence for that understanding to be delivered. The wisdom came not through external voice, but through internal clarity, not through supernatural intervention, but through natural expansion of consciousness. The silence created space for intelligence beyond his individual thinking to operate through his process. Individual mind. This is the secret most prayer practitioners never learn. They pray constantly but never listen. They make requests but never receive instructions. They ask for miracles but never notice the guidance that would make those miracles inevitable. Your subconscious mind processes millions of pieces of information every second. Most of this processing happens below the level of conscious awareness. But in states of deep silence, some of this subconscious intelligence surfaces into conscious understanding. The guidance you seek is not coming from outside you. It is emerging from within you. But it can only emerge when the surface mind becomes still enough to notice what the deeper mind has discovered. Here is how to practice the prayer of sacred silence. After you have spoken your definite purpose with emotional conviction, sit quietly for 5 minutes. Do not try to think. Do not try to solve problems. Do not try to plan your next steps. Simply rest in alert stillness. Your mind will attempt to fill this silence with thoughts, worries, and mental noise. Gently return your attention to stillness each time you notice mental chatter beginning. You are not trying to stop thinking. You are learning to stop identifying with every thought that arises. In this silence, pay attention to subtle impressions, gentle impulses, quiet knowing that seems to arise from nowhere. These are not your thoughts. They are guidance emerging from intelligence beyond your individual thinking. The first few times you practice this silence, you may notice nothing except how difficult it is to be quiet. This is normal. Your mind has been trained to constant activity. Learning to be still requires practice, just like learning any other skill. But as you develop this capacity for receptive silence, you will begin to notice something remarkable. Solutions appear for problems you were not consciously trying to solve. Connections become clear that were previously hidden. Next steps reveal themselves without mental effort. This is not magic. This is the natural result of creating space for subconscious intelligence to communicate with conscious awareness. This is how intuition works. This is how guidance operates. This is how divine intelligence expresses itself through human consciousness. Write this commitment. After each prayer of declaration, I will sit in silence for 5 minutes, creating space for guidance to emerge. But do not expect this guidance to arrive as dramatic visions or supernatural voices. Divine intelligence usually speaks through practical ideas, timely opportunities, meaningful coincidences, and gradual shifts in understanding. The guidance might come as a sudden knowing that you should contact a specific person. It might arrive as clarity about which opportunity to pursue. It might manifest as understanding about what skill to develop or what habit to change. Trust these gentle impressions. Act on these quiet impulses. Follow these subtle instructions. They are not random thoughts. They are precise guidance emerging from intelligence that sees patterns your conscious mind cannot perceive. This is how Carnegie received the insights that built his empire. Not through dramatic revelations, but through quiet knowing that emerged during periods of reflective silence. He would pose questions to his subconscious, then wait quietly for answers to surface. The combination of definite prayer and receptive silence creates a complete communication system. You program your objectives through active declaration. You receive guidance for achieving those objectives through passive reception. But even the wisest guidance requires amplification through alliance. Individual insight becomes collective intelligence through the principle of mastermind coordination. Your prayers become exponentially more powerful when they align with the prayers of others who share your commitment to growth and service. Are you ready to multiply your spiritual power through strategic alliance? Are you prepared to discover how coordinated prayer creates results beyond what individual effort can achieve? The next movement reveals how to transform personal prayer into collective force, individual desire into shared mission, private practice into organized power. Because the miracle you can create alone is nothing compared to the miracle you can create with others who share your vision and commitment to its manifestation through disciplined action. Movement IV, Mastermind Alliance, and Sacred Service. Individual prayer is powerful. Coordinated prayer is unstoppable. When two or more minds unite in harmony around a definite spiritual objective, they create a force that transcends the sum of their individual capacities. This is not religious sentiment. This is documented principle. Andrew Carnegie built his fortune not through solitary effort, but through the systematic coordination of brilliant minds united around shared objectives. John D. Rockefeller organized his empire through alliances of men who prayed together, planned together, and profited together. The Mastermind Principle operates on this law. When individual minds harmonize around a definite purpose, they generate collective intelligence beyond what any single mind could produce. The whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts through spiritual coordination. But most people try to achieve their objectives in isolation. They pray alone, plan alone, struggle alone, and wonder why their progress is slow. They have never learned that multiplication comes through coordination, that acceleration comes through alliance, that miracles come through organized spiritual effort. Your prayer life requires strategic relationships. You need people who will reinforce your faith when doubt arises, challenge your thinking when it becomes lazy, celebrate your progress when victories come, and hold you accountable when commitment wavers. These relationships cannot be casual. They must be intentional, structured, and governed by mutual commitment to growth. The Mastermind Alliance is not social gathering. It is spiritual coordination for practical purposes. Here is how to build your prayer mastermind. Identify 3 to 5 people who demonstrate serious commitment to personal development and spiritual growth. Approach them with a specific proposal for weekly coordination around shared objectives. Meet for precisely 30 minutes each week to share progress, discuss challenges, and coordinate next steps. Each member speaks their definite purpose aloud at every meeting. Each member reports specific actions taken since the previous meeting. Each member requests specific support from the group for the coming week. Each member commits to specific actions before the next gathering. This is not therapy. This is not social support. This is organized spiritual effort focused on measurable results. The conversation remains positive, definite, and action-oriented. No complaints, no excuses, no dwelling on problems without proposing solutions. The power of this alliance emerges gradually. As individual minds harmonize around shared commitment to growth, collective insights arise that no single member could generate alone. Solutions appear, opportunities surface, connections form. Resources organize themselves around the group's combined spiritual momentum, but the Mastermind Principle requires one additional element to reach its full power: service to others beyond the alliance itself. Coordinated self-interest creates temporary results. Coordinated service creates permanent transformation. Rockefeller understood this perfectly. His alliance of minds was not focused only on personal profit, but on providing essential services that improved life for millions. The oil his companies refined lit homes, powered transportation, and enabled industrial progress that lifted entire communities. Your Mastermind Alliance must identify ways to serve others through the achievement of your individual objectives. How will your success benefit people beyond yourself? What problems will you solve? What needs will you meet? What value will you create? When your coordinated prayers focus on service as well as success, they align with larger patterns of universal growth. They become part of the evolutionary force that lifts all life toward greater complexity, beauty, and consciousness. This service component transforms prayer from petition into partnership. You are no longer asking the universe to give you what you want. You are offering the universe your coordinated efforts to create what it needs through your individual and collective talents. Pray this declaration together with your Mastermind Alliance. We unite our minds in service to life itself. We coordinate our efforts to create value, solve problems, and improve conditions for ourselves and others. We pray not for selfish gain, but for the opportunity to serve the highest good through our individual talents organized around shared purpose. But coordination without action remains fantasy. The most harmonious mastermind alliance will produce nothing without systematic implementation of inspired ideas through disciplined behavior. Your prayers must transform into specific actions that create measurable progress toward definite objectives. The next movement teaches the prayer of action that burns bridges, eliminates retreat, and creates conditions where your objectives must manifest through the sheer force of committed behavior. Are you ready to discover how spiritual practice transforms into practical results? Are you prepared to learn how prayer becomes power through the alchemy of decisive action? Because the miracle you pray for is waiting on the other side of the action you have been avoiding. The breakthrough you seek requires the breakthrough behavior you have been postponing. Movement V, the prayer of action that burns bridges. Prayer without action is fantasy. Action without prayer is struggle. But prayer transformed into action becomes the force that reshapes reality according to spiritual law. The prayer of action operates on this principle. When you commit your behavior irrevocably to your stated objectives, you create conditions where success becomes more likely than failure, where breakthrough becomes more natural than breakdown, where miracles become more probable than mediocrity. Abraham Lincoln understood this law when he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He did not wait until he felt confident about the outcome. He did not delay until public opinion supported his decision. He acted in accordance with his deepest spiritual conviction and allowed the consequences to organize themselves around his commitment. The signature on that document was a prayer of action. It declared to the universe, to history, and to his own subconscious mind that there would be no retreat from this moral position. The bridges were burned. The commitment was absolute. The only path led forward through whatever obstacles might arise. This is why most prayers remain unanswered. The person praying maintains escape routes. They hold mental reservations. They keep backup plans that actually undermine their primary objectives. They pray for success while planning for failure. But the prayer of action eliminates alternatives. It creates what military strategists call burning the boats, the point of no return that focuses all energy and intelligence on finding ways forward rather than ways backward. What action would demonstrate absolute commitment to your definite purpose? What behavior would announce to the world that you have become serious about your transformation? What decision would make retreat impossible and breakthrough inevitable? If your objective is financial independence, perhaps the action is quitting the job that keeps you comfortable but prevents growth. If your goal is physical health, perhaps the behavior is joining a gym with a year-long contract and hiring a personal trainer. If your purpose is creative expression, perhaps the commitment is scheduling your first public performance. The specific action matters less than the spiritual quality it embodies, irrevocable commitment expressed through irreversible behavior. Henry Ford burned bridges when he committed his entire fortune to developing the V8 engine despite engineers telling him it was impossible. Charles Schwab burned bridges when he left secure employment to build steel production systems that had never been attempted. Thomas Edison burned bridges when he promised electric light before he knew how to create it. Each of these men understood that breakthrough requires breakdown of old patterns, old securities, old ways of thinking and acting. They used commitment as the force that destroyed their familiar limitations and created space for unprecedented achievement. Your prayer of action must contain this same quality of irrevocable commitment. It must be public enough that retreat would be embarrassing. It must be specific enough that progress can be measured. It must be challenging enough that it requires growth to succeed. Write this commitment now. Within 24 hours, I will take one action that demonstrates absolute commitment to my definite purpose. This action will be public, measurable, and require sustained effort to complete successfully. But understand what you are invoking. When you burn bridges through committed action, you activate forces that will test your resolve. Obstacles will appear. Critics will emerge. Doubt will whisper that you have made a mistake. These challenges are not signs that you should retreat. They are confirmation that you have activated the law correctly. The universe tests every serious commitment through temporary difficulty. It wants to know if you mean what you prayed. This is where most people fail. They take bold action, encounter resistance, and interpret difficulty as evidence that they should return to familiar patterns. They do not understand that resistance is the natural response of old systems to new growth. But the person who persists through this testing period discovers something remarkable. The obstacles that seemed permanent begin to dissolve. The critics who seemed powerful begin to seem irrelevant. The doubts that seemed reasonable begin to seem like old programming. New resources appear. Unexpected support arrives. Creative solutions emerge. Opportunities organize themselves around the demonstration of serious commitment. This is not magic. This is the natural consequence of burning mental and behavioral bridges. When your subconscious mind recognizes that retreat is impossible, it redirects all its creative intelligence toward finding ways to succeed. The prayer of action also sends signals to other people that you have become serious about your transformation. It attracts allies who respect commitment. It repels those who would drain your energy through their own doubt and limitation. Carnegie's commitment to steel production attracted the most talented metallurgists, engineers, and managers of his era. They wanted to be part of something definite, something challenging, something that required the best of their abilities. Your commitment will have the same magnetic effect. When you demonstrate through action that you have become serious about growth, serious people will become interested in coordinating their efforts with yours. But this attraction only works if your commitment is genuine. It must be demonstrated through behavior, not just announced through words. The universe and other people can sense the difference between real commitment and performance of commitment. This is why the prayer of action must be followed by systematic ritual that maintains the spiritual momentum you have created through decisive behavior. Are you ready to learn the daily practices that transform temporary inspiration into permanent transformation? Are you prepared to discover the ritual architecture that makes spiritual growth as reliable as physical exercise? The final movement reveals the 11 lines of mirror work that reprogram your identity, followed by the 30-60-90-day protocol that measures your spiritual progress through material results. Movement VI, the sacred ritual of daily transformation. Now we arrive at the practical architecture of spiritual transformation. Everything you have learned about prayer, purpose, emotion, silence, alliance, and action must be organized into daily ritual that creates permanent change in your consciousness and circumstances. Most people experience spiritual insights in moments of inspiration, then return to familiar patterns of thinking and behavior. They have peak experiences but no systematic method for integrating these experiences into daily life. The insight fades, the inspiration diminishes, the old patterns reassert themselves. But the ritual of daily transformation prevents this spiritual regression. It creates a structure that maintains your connection to higher consciousness regardless of external circumstances. It makes growth as regular and reliable as any other discipline. This ritual has 3 components: identity programming through mirror work, subconscious alignment through silent meditation, and progress measurement through systematic evaluation. Together, these practices create a spiritual gymnasium where your consciousness becomes stronger, clearer, and more powerful each day. Let me guide you through this sacred architecture. The mirror ritual. Stand before a mirror in a private space where you will not be interrupted. Look directly into your own eyes. Speak these 11 lines with conviction, emotion, and absolute belief. Say each line 3 times before moving to the next. Feel the truth of each statement in your body as you speak it. I am the master of my own destiny through spiritual law and disciplined action. I attract wealth because I create value that serves the genuine needs of others. I command respect because I respect the divine intelligence that operates through all life. I deserve abundance because I give abundantly of my talents, energy, and resources. I create opportunities because I recognize that opportunity is disguised as work requiring vision. I build lasting success because I align my efforts with principles that transcend temporary circumstances. I receive guidance because I create silence that allows divine intelligence to speak through my consciousness. I attract loyal allies because I am loyal to the highest good in myself and others. I overcome obstacles because I understand that resistance develops the strength required for leadership. I achieve my definite purpose because I take action in spite of fear, doubt, and criticism. I live with gratitude because I recognize that my ability to create and serve is a sacred gift. After completing these 11 statements, speak this closing creed. I do not wait for freedom. I build it now. Perform this mirror ritual every morning immediately after awakening, before checking messages or engaging with any external demands. Your first conversation each day must be with your highest self, not with the world's problems and distractions. The mirror forces you to look directly at the person who must change if your life is to change. The repetition programs your subconscious with new identity patterns. The emotion creates the electrical charge necessary for transformation. The consistency builds spiritual momentum that becomes unstoppable over time. The silence protocol. After completing the mirror ritual, sit quietly for 5 minutes in receptive silence. This is not thinking time. This is receiving time. Your conscious mind has just been programmed with new patterns. Now create space for subconscious intelligence to organize itself around these patterns. Set a timer so you do not need to track time. Sit with your spine straight, your eyes closed, your hands relaxed. When thoughts arise, notice them without engaging them. Return your attention to the sensation of breathing without controlling the breath. During these 5 minutes of silence, pay attention to subtle impressions, gentle impulses, quiet knowing that seems to emerge from stillness itself. These impressions are guidance arising from intelligence beyond your individual thinking. At the end of the 5 minutes, immediately write down any insights, ideas, or impulses that arose during the silence. Do not evaluate these insights, simply record them. Throughout the day, pay attention to circumstances that might relate to the guidance you received. The Progress Protocol, 306090-day measurement. Spiritual transformation must be measured through material results, or it remains merely psychological entertainment. The prayer that produces miracles creates measurable changes in your circumstances, relationships, and capabilities. At 30 days, evaluate 3 specific areas. First, what new opportunities have appeared since you began this practice? Second, what old patterns or relationships have naturally fallen away? Third, what new capacities or insights have developed in your thinking? At 60 days, assess the systematic changes in your approach to challenges. Are you responding to obstacles with greater creativity and persistence? Are you attracting different types of people into your life? Are you handling stress and uncertainty with greater equanimity? At 90 days, measure the concrete progress toward your definite purpose. What specific actions have you taken that you would not have taken before? What results have those actions produced? How has your identity shifted in ways that support continued growth? This measurement is not about judging yourself as successful or unsuccessful. It is about developing sensitivity to the subtle ways spiritual practice influences practical results. This sensitivity allows you to adjust your practice to increase its effectiveness. Remember that spiritual growth often produces temporary chaos as old patterns dissolve to make room for new ones. Do not interpret temporary difficulty as evidence that the practice is failing. Interpret it as evidence that transformation is occurring. The weekly mastermind coordination. Once each week, coordinate with your Mastermind Alliance to share progress, discuss challenges, and commit to specific actions for the coming week. This accountability prevents the spiritual bypassing that keeps many practitioners stuck in insights without implementation. During these meetings, each person reports on their daily ritual consistency, shares insights from their silence protocols, and describes specific actions taken toward their definite purpose. The group provides encouragement, practical suggestions, and firm accountability. This weekly coordination creates a rhythm of spiritual community that reinforces individual practice while building collective momentum toward shared objectives. Movement 7. The closing declaration. You now possess the complete system for transforming prayer from petition into power, from begging into building, from hoping into creating. But possession of knowledge means nothing without application of principle. The gap between knowing and doing is where most spiritual aspirations die. They are killed not by opposition from others, but by internal resistance to the discipline that transformation requires. They are destroyed not by lack of opportunity, but by lack of systematic practice. You face a choice that will determine whether this knowledge becomes power in your life or merely information in your memory. Will you commit to the daily ritual that makes transformation inevitable? Or will you allow the familiar patterns of spiritual procrastination to reassert themselves? I have given you the law. I have shown you the method. I have provided the structure. But I cannot provide the discipline. That must come from your own decision to value growth more than comfort, progress more than security, transformation more than stagnation. The sacred oath. Speak this oath aloud as your commitment to systematic spiritual practice. I am not a passive recipient of circumstances. I am an active creator of conditions through spiritual law and disciplined action. I pray not to beg the universe for favors, but to align my consciousness with the forces that build, heal, and create value in the world. I commit to the daily ritual of identity programming through mirror work, guidance reception through sacred silence, and progress measurement through systematic evaluation. I will coordinate my spiritual practice with others who share my commitment to growth and service. I will take action that burns bridges and eliminates retreat from my highest purpose. I will persist through resistance, learn from setbacks, and measure my spiritual development through material results that benefit myself and others. I reject the religion of waiting for external salvation. I embrace the spirituality of creating internal transformation that manifests as external improvement. I am not a victim of fate. I am a partner in creation through prayer transformed into power. The 24-hour command. Your transformation begins now, not tomorrow. Within the next 24 hours, you must take these specific actions or you will remain exactly where you are, dreaming of change while practicing the habits that prevent it. First, write your definite purpose in one sentence that is specific, measurable, and deadline-driven. Read this sentence aloud with conviction and emotion. Second, perform the 11-line mirror ritual once, speaking each line 3 times with absolute belief in its truth. Third, sit in 5 minutes of receptive silence, creating space for guidance to emerge from your subconscious intelligence. Fourth, identify one action that demonstrates irrevocable commitment to your definite purpose. Take this action within 24 hours. Fifth, contact one person who might join your Mastermind Alliance. Propose weekly coordination around mutual spiritual and practical development. If you complete these 5 actions within 24 hours, you will have activated the system that transforms prayer into power. If you delay, rationalize, or modify these instructions, you will have demonstrated that you prefer familiar limitation to unfamiliar growth. The choice is yours. The law is available. The method is proven. The only question is whether you possess the spiritual courage to apply what you now understand. The miracle you seek is not hiding in some distant future. It is waiting in the next decision you make with absolute conviction, the next action you take without reservation, the next prayer you speak with complete alignment between your words and your will. But before you can speak such prayers, you must confront the subtle resistances that keep most spiritual practitioners trapped in cycles of temporary inspiration followed by permanent regression. You must understand why most people pray for years without producing measurable transformation in their circumstances. The antidotes to spiritual procrastination. But what if I fail after making such bold commitments? Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the raw material from which success is manufactured. Every failure contains information that makes the next attempt more intelligent. The only real failure is the failure to attempt anything worthy of your spiritual capacity. What if people criticize me for claiming such ambitious objectives? Criticism from people who have never attempted anything significant is the tax you pay for attempting something meaningful. The opinion of those who choose safety over growth is irrelevant to those who choose growth over safety. What if this spiritual practice conflicts with my religious beliefs? These principles operate within any religious framework that acknowledges the creative power of consciousness. You are not abandoning your faith. You are applying it with greater precision and measurable accountability. What if I don't have time for daily ritual on top of everything else I must do? You do not find time for spiritual practice. You make time by eliminating activities that serve no purpose beyond entertainment or escape. The person who claims to have no time for growth is advertising their priorities. What if this approach seems too aggressive or materialistic for genuine spirituality? Spirituality that produces no improvement in your capacity to serve others through practical contributions is merely self-indulgent philosophy. True spiritual development makes you more effective in the world, not less. What if I start this practice and then lose motivation? Motivation is not required. Discipline is required. Motivation is an emotion that comes and goes. Discipline is a decision that becomes automatic through repetition. You do not wait for motivation. You act according to commitment and allow motivation to follow. Now let us address the deeper resistance that keeps most prayers powerless. The spiritual materialism that defeats prayer. Many people approach spiritual practice with the same consumer mentality they bring to shopping. They want results without investment, transformation without discipline, miracles without method. They treat prayer like a vending machine, where you insert the right words and receive the desired outcome. This spiritual materialism is more destructive than honest materialism because it masquerades as higher consciousness while remaining trapped in the lowest levels of thinking. The honest materialist at least acknowledges that results require work. The spiritual materialist expects the universe to do the work while they provide only wishful thinking. True spirituality is the most practical force in existence because it aligns individual consciousness with the laws that govern success in every area of life. It does not promise something for nothing. It promises everything for everything. Complete commitment produces complete transformation. Partial commitment produces partial results. The prayer that produces miracles requires what every other achievement requires: clear objectives, systematic method, persistent application, and willingness to pay whatever price transformation demands. The only difference is that spiritual achievement operates through inner law rather than external manipulation. When you pray with definite purpose backed by emotional conviction, followed by receptive silence, coordinated through mastermind alliance, and expressed through committed action, you are not asking the universe to give you something you have not earned. You are aligning with the forces that create everything worth having. The architecture of absolute faith. Faith is not blind belief in impossible outcomes. Faith is accurate perception of how consciousness creates circumstances through systematic application of spiritual law. When you understand the mechanism, faith becomes as natural as confidence in any other reliable system. The reason most people struggle with faith is that they have never been taught how consciousness actually operates. They think of mind as separate from world, prayer as separate from action, spiritual as separate from practical. But these divisions exist only in confused thinking. Your consciousness is not contained within your skull. It extends into the world through your attention, perception, decision, and behavior. What you consistently focus on expands in your experience. What you repeatedly think about appears in your circumstances. What you emotionally charge with feeling manifests in your conditions. This is not mystical speculation. This is observable fact that can be verified through systematic experiment. Change your consistent thoughts and your circumstances will change. Change your habitual focus, and your opportunities will change. Change your dominant emotions, and your relationships will change. The prayer that produces miracles operates through this same mechanism. It programs your consciousness with specific patterns that attract corresponding circumstances. It aligns your inner world with your desired outer world through systematic spiritual practice. But this alignment requires more than occasional inspiration. It requires daily discipline that maintains the spiritual momentum necessary for permanent transformation. The daily death and resurrection. Every morning when you perform the mirror ritual, you are enacting a sacred death and resurrection. You are killing the person you were yesterday to make room for the person you are becoming today. You are dying to old patterns to be reborn into new possibilities. This process feels uncomfortable because death always feels uncomfortable, even when it is voluntary and necessary. The familiar self resists dissolution, even when that dissolution creates space for a better self to emerge. But comfort is not the goal. Growth is the goal. And growth always requires the death of current limitations to make room for expanded capacities. The person who tries to avoid this discomfort will never access the power that lies beyond it. When you speak the 11 lines of identity programming, you are installing new software in your subconscious operating system. But old software does not delete itself automatically. It must be overwritten through consistent repetition of new patterns. This is why the ritual must be performed daily without exception. Missing even one day allows old patterns to reassert themselves. The subconscious mind interprets inconsistency as lack of serious commitment and responds accordingly. Your mirror work is not affirmation practice. It is identity reconstruction. You are not trying to convince yourself of something you do not believe. You are programming yourself to become someone who naturally believes these truths because they describe who you actually are. The alchemy of sacred service. The highest level of prayer transcends personal desire and enters the realm of sacred service. When your prayers align with the evolutionary force that lifts all life toward greater complexity, beauty, and consciousness, they tap into power that individual desire alone cannot access. This does not mean abandoning personal objectives. It means embedding personal objectives within larger patterns of service that benefit others as well as yourself. When your individual success serves the genuine needs of other people, it aligns with universal forces that create lasting prosperity. Carnegie's prayer for steel empire aligned with America's need for industrial infrastructure. Ford's prayer for automobile production aligned with humanity's need for efficient transportation. Edison's prayer for electric light aligned with civilization's need for reliable illumination. Each of these men achieved extraordinary personal success because their personal objectives served universal human needs. Their individual prayers became part of the larger prayer of human progress toward greater capability and abundance. What universal need does your definite purpose serve? How does your individual success contribute to the general improvement of life on Earth? How does your personal transformation make you more capable of serving others? These questions are not philosophical exercises. They are practical considerations that determine whether your prayers operate with individual energy alone or tap into the unlimited power that flows through service to life itself. When you connect your personal objectives to larger patterns of service, your prayers become part of the creative force that builds civilization. You are no longer asking the universe to give you something. You are offering the universe your talents in service of its evolutionary agenda. This connection to sacred service transforms the entire quality of your spiritual practice. Prayer becomes collaboration with divine intelligence rather than petition to external authority. You become a conscious participant in creation rather than a passive recipient of circumstances. The laboratory of daily experience every day provides opportunities to test the principles you are learning through direct experiment. Every interaction, every challenge, every decision becomes a chance to apply spiritual law in practical situations. Do not wait until you feel completely confident before beginning to apply these principles. Confidence develops through application, not before it. Start where you are with whatever faith you currently possess. Your faith will grow stronger through use, not through waiting. When you encounter obstacles, use them as opportunities to practice persistence guided by spiritual principle. When you meet criticism, use it as a chance to practice inner conviction independent of external approval. When you face uncertainty, Use it as training in taking action based on inner guidance rather than external guarantees. Your daily life becomes a spiritual gymnasium where you develop strength, clarity, and skill through systematic practice under realistic conditions. Every challenge becomes equipment for building spiritual muscle. Every setback becomes information for adjusting your approach. The person who practices these principles only during formal prayer time will make slow progress. The person who applies these principles throughout daily life will experience rapid transformation because they are practicing spiritual law under the conditions where it must actually work. This integration of spiritual practice with practical activity creates a unified approach to life where every moment serves the purpose of conscious development. You are no longer dividing your existence between spiritual time and practical time. Everything becomes spiritual practice applied to practical circumstances. The magnetism of authentic commitment. When you demonstrate genuine commitment to your definite purpose through consistent spiritual practice backed by decisive action, you begin to attract resources, opportunities, and allies that were previously invisible or unavailable. This attraction operates through multiple mechanisms. First, your heightened awareness notices possibilities that you previously overlooked. Second, your improved focus directs your energy toward activities that produce results rather than mere activity. Third, your demonstrated commitment signals to others that you are serious enough to warrant their attention and support. But this magnetism only operates when your commitment is authentic. The universe and other people can sense the difference between genuine dedication and performance of dedication. Authentic commitment has a different quality of energy that cannot be faked or manufactured through technique alone. Authentic commitment emerges from clarity about why your objectives matter, not just what you want to achieve. It grows from understanding how your success serves purposes larger than personal gratification. It develops from willingness to pay whatever price transformation requires. This deeper level of commitment creates what spiritual traditions call grace, the feeling that circumstances are organizing themselves around your purpose in ways that seem almost miraculous but are actually the natural. As a result of aligning individual will with universal law. Grace is not supernatural intervention. Grace is the natural response of an intelligent universe to consciousness that operates according to creative rather than destructive principles. When you pray and act in ways that serve life, life responds by serving your highest development. The point of no return. There comes a moment in every serious spiritual practice when you recognize that return to old patterns is no longer possible. The person you were before. Beginning this practice has died through systematic application of transformative principles. A new identity has emerged that cannot fit into old circumstances. This point of no return feels simultaneously liberating and terrifying. Liberating because you have proven to yourself that transformation is possible. Terrifying because the familiar securities of limited thinking are no longer available as fallback positions. Most people retreat when they reach this threshold. They become frightened by their own power and return to familiar limitations. They convince themselves that growth is dangerous, that ambition is selfish, that ordinary life is more spiritual than extraordinary achievement. But the person who crosses this threshold discovers that the fear was an illusion created by the dying patterns of old identity. On the other side of this fear lies access to capabilities, insights, and opportunities that were impossible from the previous level of consciousness. This crossing requires courage, but not the courage to do something difficult. It requires the courage to become someone different, to allow old identity to dissolve so new identity can emerge, to release attachment to who you have been in order to become who you are capable of being. The prayer that produces miracles always leads to this threshold. It always demands this choice between familiar limitation and unfamiliar growth. It always requires the death of current self to make room for larger self. Are you prepared to cross this threshold when you reach it? Are you ready to become someone you have never been in order to achieve what you have never achieved? The integration of power and wisdom. As your spiritual practice develops greater power to influence circumstances, it must also develop greater wisdom to use that power constructively. Power without wisdom creates chaos. Wisdom without power remains theoretical. But power integrated with wisdom becomes the foundation for lasting contribution to life. This integration happens naturally when your practice remains focused on service as well as success, when your prayers include gratitude as well as requests, when your objectives serve others as well as yourself, when your transformation makes you more useful to life rather than more demanding from it. The goal is not to become someone who can manipulate circumstances to satisfy personal desires regardless of consequences. The goal is to become someone who can create circumstances that serve the highest good for all concerned while fulfilling your individual purpose. This level of spiritual maturity transforms prayer from petition into participation. You are no longer asking life to give you what you want. You are offering life the gift of your talents, energy, and resources organized around purposes that serve the evolution of consciousness itself. When you reach this level of spiritual development, miracles become natural expressions of consciousness operating according to its highest capacity. They are no longer extraordinary events, but ordinary results of extraordinary alignment between individual will and universal intelligence. The sacred mathematics of transformation. Understanding spiritual law is like understanding any other natural law. It operates according to predictable principles that can be learned, applied, and verified through systematic experiment. When you plant seeds in fertile soil under proper conditions, you expect crops to grow. When you apply spiritual principles with proper understanding, under appropriate conditions, you should expect transformation to occur. But most people approach spiritual practice with superstitious thinking rather than scientific method. They perform rituals without understanding principles. They repeat words without grasping their function. They expect results without creating proper conditions. The prayer that produces miracles operates according to precise spiritual mathematics. Input determines output. Quality of consciousness creates quality of circumstances. Consistency of practice produces reliability of results. This mathematics is not complex, but it is exact. You cannot approximate spiritual law and expect precise results any more than you can approximate mathematical law and expect accurate calculations. The formulas work when applied correctly and fail when applied carelessly. Here is the basic equation. Definite purpose plus emotional conviction plus receptive silence plus coordinated action plus systematic persistence equals inevitable transformation. Each element is necessary. None is sufficient alone. But when combined in proper proportion through daily practice, they create results that appear miraculous to those who do not understand the underlying mechanics. The compound interest of consciousness. Just as money invested consistently over time creates compound financial returns, consciousness invested consistently in spiritual practice creates compound returns in capability, insight, and influence. The first month of practice produces subtle changes that may be barely noticeable. The second month builds on the first to create more obvious improvements. The third month accelerates the process as momentum develops. By the sixth month, the changes become dramatic. By the end of the first year, transformation becomes undeniable. But this compound effect only works with consistent practice. Interrupted practice must begin the compounding process again from the beginning. This is why most people never experience the full power of spiritual law. They practice inconsistently and never build the momentum necessary for dramatic results. Your spiritual practice is like making deposits in a cosmic bank account that pays extraordinary interest rates but requires regular contributions to maintain active status. Miss too many deposits and the account closes. Maintain regular deposits and the returns become exponential. The person who practices spiritual law consistently for 1 year will achieve more transformation than the person who practices occasionally for 10 years. Consistency trumps intensity when it comes to permanent change in consciousness and circumstances. The network effect of spiritual alliance. Individual spiritual practice creates individual results. Coordinated spiritual practice creates exponential results through network effects that multiply individual effort. When you align your practice with others who share your commitment to growth, you tap into collective intelligence that transcends what any individual mind could produce alone. You gain access to opportunities that appear through other people's networks. You receive encouragement that sustains you through difficult periods. You develop accountability that prevents backsliding into old patterns. But this network effect only operates when the alliance is genuine. It cannot be faked or manufactured through superficial association. It requires authentic commitment to each other's highest development, expressed through consistent mutual support. The Mastermind Alliance is not social networking for spiritual people. It is spiritual engineering that creates collective capability beyond the sum of individual talents. When properly coordinated, 3 committed people can achieve more than 10 uncommitted people. This coordination requires structure, commitment, and mutual accountability. It cannot be casual or inconsistent. It must be treated as seriously as any other important business relationship because it is conducting the most important business possible, the transformation of human consciousness, the technology of faith. Faith is not belief without evidence. Faith is recognition of how consciousness creates evidence through systematic application of spiritual law. It is understanding that inner transformation precedes outer transformation according to reliable principles. When you plant seeds, you have faith in the harvest, not because you can see the crops immediately, but because you understand the process by which seeds become crops under proper conditions. Spiritual faith operates according to the same logic. You apply spiritual principles with faith because you understand the process by which consciousness creates circumstances through definite purpose, emotional conviction, receptive guidance, coordinated action, and persistent application. This understanding transforms faith from blind hope into informed confidence. You do not hope for miracles. You expect them because you are creating the conditions that make them inevitable according to spiritual law. But this technological approach to faith requires precision in application. You cannot be sloppy with spiritual law any more than you can be sloppy with physical law and expect reliable results. The principles must be applied exactly as designed, consistently over time, with full commitment to the process. The ecology of consciousness. Your individual consciousness does not exist in isolation. It operates within an ecology of other conscious beings, all influencing each other through subtle communication that happens below the level of ordinary awareness. When you raise the quality of your own consciousness through spiritual practice, you contribute to raising the quality of consciousness throughout the entire network. When you align your consciousness with creative rather than destructive forces, you strengthen those forces for everyone. This ecological understanding transforms spiritual practice from self-improvement project into service to life itself. You are not just working on yourself. You are working on the collective consciousness that shapes conditions for all beings. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you make growth easier for others. Every time you choose love over fear, you strengthen love in the collective field. Every time you choose contribution over consumption, you support abundance for everyone. This ecological responsibility means that your spiritual practice has implications beyond your individual development. It affects your family, your community, your culture, and ultimately the entire human species. You cannot separate your individual transformation from its impact on the whole. When you become more conscious, you contribute to making consciousness more accessible to others. When you demonstrate what is possible through spiritual practice, you inspire others to attempt their own transformation. The legacy architecture of sacred purpose. The ultimate test of spiritual practice is not what you achieve for yourself, but what you create that serves others long after your individual participation has ended. True success creates platforms that enable other people to achieve their own transformation more easily. Carnegie created libraries that educated millions. Ford created production systems that provided employment for thousands. Edison created inventions that improved life for billions. Each man achieved extraordinary personal success in service of contributions that transcended personal benefit. Your spiritual practice should be building towards similar legacy contribution, not necessarily on the same scale, but according to the same principle. Your individual transformation should be creating capability to serve purposes larger than individual satisfaction. What legacy are you building through your spiritual development? What platform are you creating that will serve others? What contribution will you make that will continue serving life after your personal involvement ends? These questions are not premature regardless of your current level of development. Every level of consciousness can create some form of contribution to the whole. The key is to embed legacy thinking into your spiritual practice from the beginning rather than adding it as an afterthought. When your individual prayers are connected to legacy purposes, they tap into evolutionary forces that support long-term contribution rather than short-term gratification. They align with the universe's agenda for consciousness development rather than merely personal agenda for circumstance improvement. The graduation from prayer to creation. As your spiritual practice matures, you begin to recognize that you are not petitioning external authority for favors. You are discovering and applying the creative principles through which consciousness manifests experience. This recognition transforms your relationship to spiritual practice from dependence to collaboration. You are not asking something outside yourself to create what you desire. You are learning to use the creative mechanisms that operate through consciousness itself. Prayer becomes a technology for consciousness development rather than a method for circumstance manipulation. The goal shifts from getting what you want to becoming someone capable of creating what the world needs through your individual talents organized around universal purposes. This graduation from petition to creation represents spiritual maturity. You no longer see yourself as separate from the creative force that builds worlds. You recognize yourself as a unique expression of that force, capable of participating consciously in creation itself. But this maturity brings increased responsibility. When you understand how consciousness creates circumstances, you become accountable for the circumstances you create. You cannot blame external forces for conditions that result from your own thinking, feeling, and acting. This accountability is not burden, but liberation. When you know how creation works, you can consciously participate in creating conditions that serve your highest purposes and contribute to the highest good for all concerned. The infinite game of consciousness. Development. There are two types of games in life: finite games played for the purpose of winning, and infinite games played for the purpose of continuing to play. Spiritual development is an infinite game. The purpose is not to reach some final destination, but to continue growing in capacity, wisdom, and service. This infinite perspective prevents the spiritual materialism that treats awakening as acquisition of special status rather than development of greater capability to serve life. It keeps spiritual practice focused on ongoing development rather than achievement of final attainment. Every level of consciousness development reveals new possibilities for growth. Every accomplishment creates capacity for greater accomplishment. Every service completed prepares you for more significant service. The person who approaches spiritual practice as infinite game remains hungry for growth regardless of what they have achieved. They use success as platform for greater service rather than excuse for complacency. They understand that consciousness has no ceiling except the limits they accept. This infinite perspective also prevents the discouragement that comes from comparing your progress to others or measuring your development against arbitrary timelines. You are not competing with anyone. You are exploring the infinite potential of consciousness expressed through your unique combination of talents, circumstances, and opportunities. The final integration. Now you possess complete understanding of how prayer transforms from petition into power through systematic application of spiritual law. You know how to align individual consciousness with universal intelligence through definite purpose, emotional conviction, receptive silence, coordinated alliance, and committed action, you understand that miracles are not violations of natural law, but expressions of consciousness operating according to its highest capacity. You recognize that transformation is not mysterious process, but predictable result of specific causes applied consistently over time. You have the technology, you have the method, you have the support system, you have the accountability structure, everything required for systematic transformation is available to you right now. The only question is whether you will apply what you understand with the consistency and commitment required for permanent results. Will you practice these principles daily regardless of how you feel? Will you maintain this practice when enthusiasm fades? Will you persist when obstacles appear? Your answer to these questions will determine whether this knowledge becomes power in your life or merely interesting information in your memory. The eternal choice, every moment presents the same choice. Will you think, speak, and act as the person you have always been, or as the person you are becoming through spiritual practice? This choice never ends. Even after years of successful practice, the option to return to old patterns remains available. Consciousness development is not permanent achievement, but ongoing choice to align with your highest capacity in each moment. But the choice becomes easier as spiritual practice develops momentum. New patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting become more natural than old patterns. Eventually, operating from higher consciousness requires less effort than operating from limited consciousness. This is when spiritual practice transforms from discipline into delight. You no longer force yourself to meditate, affirm, and serve. You naturally gravitate toward activities that support consciousness development because they feel better than activities that support limitation. You have graduated from spiritual effort to spiritual ease, not because the practice has ended, but because the practice has become so integrated into your identity that it operates automatically, like breathing or heartbeat. The sacred commitment. I call you now to sacred commitment that will determine the trajectory of your consciousness development for the rest of your life. This commitment cannot be casual or theoretical. It must be absolute and practical. Speak these words as your sacred oath. I commit to daily spiritual practice that transforms my consciousness and circumstances through systematic application of spiritual law. I will perform the mirror ritual every morning, create receptive silence for divine guidance, coordinate with spiritual allies for mutual development, and take actions that demonstrate absolute commitment to my definite purpose. I will persist through resistance, learn from setbacks, and measure my spiritual development through increased capacity to serve life. I will not retreat to familiar limitations when growth becomes challenging. I will not abandon this practice when initial enthusiasm fades. I understand that this commitment is not to temporary self-improvement, but to permanent consciousness development that serves purposes larger than individual satisfaction. I am not seeking miracles for their own sake, but developing the capacity to participate consciously in the miraculous process of creation itself. I accept complete responsibility for the circumstances I create through my thinking, feeling, and acting. I will not blame external forces for conditions that result from my own consciousness. I will use every experience as opportunity to develop greater wisdom, strength, and service capability. This is my sacred commitment. This is my spiritual declaration. This is my eternal choice to grow in consciousness rather than remain trapped in limitation. The immediate, imperative, your transformation begins now, not tomorrow, not next week. Not when you feel more ready. Now, within the next 24 hours, you must complete these 5 actions, or you will have chosen familiar limitation over unfamiliar growth. Write your definite purpose in one sentence that is specific, measurable, and includes a deadline. Read this sentence aloud with complete conviction 3 times. Stand before a mirror and speak the 11 lines of identity programming, saying each line 3 times with emotional intensity and absolute belief. Sit in 5 minutes of receptive silence, creating space for guidance to emerge from divine intelligence operating through your consciousness. Take one specific action that demonstrates irrevocable commitment to your definite purpose. This action must be public enough that retreat would be embarrassing and challenging enough that it requires sustained effort to complete. Contact one person who might join your Mastermind Alliance for weekly coordination around spiritual development and practical achievement. If you complete these actions within 24 hours, you will have activated the system that transforms prayer into power. If you delay or modify these instructions, you will have demonstrated preference for familiar limitation over unfamiliar growth. The choice is yours. The law is available. The method is proven. The support is ready. The only question is whether you possess the spiritual courage to become who you are capable of being. Your future self is waiting. The world needs what you can become. Life is offering you the opportunity to participate consciously in creation itself. Answer now, choose now, act now, become now. The prayer that produces miracles is the prayer backed by absolute commitment to systematic transformation through spiritual law applied with precision, persistence, and service to purposes larger than individual gratification. This is your prayer. This is your power. This is your time. Begin.